Well, I think what's happened here, Tom, is that the Iranians understand very clearly that they're in the driver's seat, and the Americans have hardly any leverage at all. So the Iranians are driving a really hard deal. And the best way to illustrate this is to look at the terms of the 17 June memorandum of understanding that the United States walked away from, and compare that with what the Iranian demands are today. I think it's really stunning how much Iran is demanding now compared to what they were demanding on June 17th in the Memorandum of Understanding. And all of this just shows you how remarkably foolish Trump was not to reach a deal based on the June 17th memorandum. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. In the June 17th memorandum, basically, we were interested in opening the straits. Both sides wanted to do away with their blockades, open the straits, and the Iranians asked and the Americans agreed to lift the oil sanctions, just the oil sanctions, so the Iranians could sell oil on open markets. The other thing that was in the 17 June memorandum was a ceasefire. And this included Lebanon, of course. But all of the other key issues were delayed. There was no demands from the Iranians that they then settle what I call the big three economic issues: the sanctions, the overall sanctions issue, the reparations issue, and the frozen assets issue. That was all delayed. Those key economic issues were going to be negotiated during this 60-day period that was laid out in the Memorandum of Understanding. Moreover, the nuclear issue was delayed as well. So once you got the ceasefire in place and you open the strait, then you would move to negotiating these big three economic issues, as I described them, plus the nuclear issue. Well, what's happened here today is that the Iranians have said the big three economic issues have to be solved on Iran's terms now before we'll open the straits. The reparations issue, they want settled before they open the strait. The overall sanctions issue, they want settled. And the frozen assets, they want settled. And there's no talk whatsoever about the nuclear issue, which is really quite remarkable. So for us to get the strait open at this point in time, we have to make all these concessions. We, meaning the Americans, have to make all these concessions on these big economic issues, not get the nuclear issue up front. This is disastrous. And it just shows you how remarkably foolish the United States has been. And by the way, if you want to take this a step further, if you go back to February 28th and the period before that, right, all we were doing at that point in time was negotiating on the nuclear issue, which has now apparently disappeared. And all these other issues, these economic issues, which play to Iran's advantage, of course, were not even on the table. So this just goes to show you how remarkably foolish the Trump administration has been and how much trouble we're in today.
So, Vali, John makes the point that Iran actually has more leverage today than it did when it signed the June 17 Memorandum of Understanding. Vali, your thoughts?
No, I fully agree. I mean, if you looked at it, Trump probably never really intended to implement that memorandum. That's actually the Iranian understanding, that he started cheating the minute that he signed it. First, he said ceasefire in Lebanon. Immediately, they brokered the deal between Lebanon and Israel, which now allows Israel to bomb Lebanon at the invitation of the Lebanese government, pretty much, trying to sideline any Iranians saying that. Secondly, there was a promise then of unfreezing at least some Iranian assets. They started with talking about 30 billion, then it went to 12 billion, went to 6 billion, went to 3 billion, and then zero was released. And then, when the Iranian belief is that actually the United States was encouraging countries to break Iran's hold over the strait, telling them not to consult with Iran. The strait is open, use channels that Iran cannot control, And Iran was put in a position that either it lets Saudi, Qatari tankers to go through, in which case then their hold on the strait would de facto be over, or to try to stop it. And in fact, the Iranians cynically believe that perhaps Qatar and Saudi Arabia gave 2 tankers to the United States as a gift, basically to try the Iranians, which has soured their views about their neighbors. But the Iranians decided to shoot at those 2 tankers. And then Trump decided not to respond in a calibrated way that might restore the MOU, but actually use it as an excuse to go back to war. Now, you consider, as John said, that the United States has bombed Iran for a month systematically. It has not at all dented Iran's ability to close the strait. Iran tightened the closure of the strait, destroyed significant amount of infrastructure in Kuwait, literally forced the United States to abandon its military bases in the Gulf and actually move a lot of its material to Syria, Jordan, and Israel. Iran hit those targets in a way that surprised the United States, particularly in Syria and then barrages that went into Jordan. It looks like when the U.S. went back to war with Iran, it was actually forced to move farther away from Iranian borders, move its war material farther away. A month into the bombing, the president threatened that, I'm going to destroy power plants, etc. The Iranians gave a list of all the power plants they would destroy in the Gulf. We'll match escalation with escalation. He backed away from that. It's clear that the U.S. doesn't have the munitions, either offensive munitions or defensive munitions, to keep bombing Iran. And as John says, so we went into this war for an additional month just for Iran to become stronger and our position to become weaker. And ultimately, what the Iranians are saying in this new proposal is, there is no more misunderstanding about control of the strait. It's going to be in black and white. Black and white, it is going to be managed by Iran in collaboration with Oman. We will tell what ships go when, and there is no more misunderstanding. So we're going to tighten the language of Article 5 to Iran's advantage. And then we're not going to, wait for you to decide whether or not you want to give money or whether or not you want to lift sanctions. You have to do all of those now. And I think there's another element here, which is cumulative, in that Trump has created such distrust about himself with the Iranians that actually it gives him even less leverage at the table than he had before. He walked away from a nuclear deal in 2018. He bombed Iranians twice in the middle of talking. Iranians went to Islamabad, immediately put a naval blockade on Iran. He signed an MOU and then undermined it and went back to war. And so, even the leverage that you might have, even if you accepted the Iranian terms, I'm not sure the Iranians would even be happy without having certain guarantees that he actually would implement.
Okay. Now, you say that the Iranians are fed up with Trump, but Trump says, and this is what he said last week, that Iran is being unbelievably duplicitous in its dealings with the US. Quote, all they do is make me angry. They just make me angry. John, as Valley makes very clear there, Iran has made it clear that it controls the Strait of Hormuz, and this is not subject to negotiation. But John, again, why would Trump accept an arrangement in the Strait of Hormuz where Iran receives fees or tolls and denies anyone to go through the waterway without his permission?
It's very simple, Tom. He has no choice. He lost the war. This is a devastating defeat for the United States. Could you tell me what the United States should do to regain leverage over Iran? I actually think you can't tell me, because we have no solution. Well,
Trump might think that because Oman is a US ally, it shouldn't be going along with his arrangement with Tehran. John.
He does think that, but it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Trump has no cards here. It's as simple as that. I mean, first of all, he can't escalate, which is his main threat, for 2 reasons. One, he's out of munitions, as Volley said. And number 2, our Gulf allies have told him in no uncertain terms that that is unacceptable. because the Iranians have made it clear that if we escalate, they will escalate and they will destroy oil facilities, desalination plants, and so forth and so on in the 6 Gulf states. And they will effectively wreck those states. And Trump doesn't want to go down that road. He has no options here. He has.
Yeah. Could the United States, Valley, can just accept that they've lost this war, as John says, and accept that Tehran essentially has control of the Strait of Hormuz, but then also just not give any reparations, no sanctions relief, not unfreeze the frozen assets? Could the Americans just do that and walk away?
Well, technically, yes, I would assume so. I mean, but that's basically accepting defeat very clearly. I mean, there is no way, I think, right now for Trump to come out of this to claim victory. I mean, there are multiple layers of defeat here. I mean, America's strategy with Iran is now a threat to our allies in the Gulf, not actually a security shield for them. Trump basically started a war that has destroyed their economies and has no way of protecting them. The U.S. military is now running out of ammunition, which has global implications with China and Russia. And Iran is holding him by the throat. I actually have to say that, the Omanis didn't go to the Iranians on their own. They went at the behest of the United States. Last time they tried to negotiate with Iran directly, which is a few months ago, the United States threatened Oman with both sanctions and military strikes. That's against an ally. And this time is very clear to the Iranians that the Omanis are not freelancing. They brought a proposal from Washington and they're carrying proposals back. And it's, I haven't seen the text of that proposal, but it's very clear that, what the Iranians are saying is basically you have to accept that you've lost this war. You have to guarantee that the war will not happen again. You have to accept that the containment of Iran is over. In other words, no more bases around us. You need to move your troops and you need to even lift your economic containment of Iran and basically accept Iran as a great power in the region. Now, I think the question for Iranians is that this is a humiliating defeat for Trump. And I think one of the war objectives for Iran now is that he would lose the midterm elections in a big way. They speak about this very openly, that would be a very marquee thing. But the other question, and John is better positioned to answer this, is can the United States, forget about Trump, accept such a defeat by a secondary power? And whether Iranians would calculate that, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, that the U.S. would revisit what happened right now. And that's why I think the Iranians want to front load everything they can get. They don't want to wait now because they actually don't trust that any kind of an end to this war would actually be stable. So they want the money, they want the reparations, they want the sanctions relief. They want some kind of a recognition of the fact that the U.S. won't be in the region. And then they could work with that to see what comes next.